cannot have full charisma if you don't have humour. You can have charisma, but it's a different kind of charisma. So the true star power is the ability to, show all kinds of emotions. And I would say that humour is high up there in terms of the skills required to be, a real star.
Welcome to the Humourology podcast with me, Paul Boross, and my glittering lineup of guests from the worlds of business, sport and entertainment, who are here to share their wisdom and their use of humour with you. Humourology is the study of how humour can dramatically improve your business success and your life. Humourology puts the fun into business fundamentals, increases the value of your laughing stock, and puts a punchline back into your bottom line. Please remember to like, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. My guest on this edition of the Humourology podcast is one of the country's premier producers at the impressive pinnacle of the TV profession. He is the multi-award-winning executive producer behind The Graham Norton Show, So Graham Norton, and Idris Elba Meets Paul McCartney, just to name a few. When he isn't overseeing interviews with the world's greatest A-listers and leading them to laughter, he keeps busy by brokering brilliant business deals. He co-founded So Television with his business partner Graham Norton in the year 2000 and has been one of the most influential figures in the world of entertainment ever since. Although our chair is not big or red, we desperately hope he will share his scintillating stories so we won't feel compelled to tip him out of it. Graham Stuart, welcome to the Humourology podcast.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. Very good to be here.
Well, it's a great pleasure to have you here. I've loved your work and admired you for so long, and it's fantastic to have you here. I'd like to start by going back to your roots. I know your roots are in Dundee. In your family, was humour valued?
That's a very good question. Yes, it was. It was valued. I'll tell you a really formative experience for me was when I was very young. My father, his best friend, the two couples, my mum and dad, and my best friend, Uncle David, and his wife, they did a thing called the swap night, and it was on Wednesday nights. And the wives would go to one house, and the husbands would go to the other house. So on the Wednesday nights when David was over with my father, that was then the night that Morecambe and Wise was on television. Early Morecambe and Wise, and as a child, I can remember the gales of laughter that came from downstairs, from my father and from David. And it was a really powerful memory for me. And my dad loved comedy, but he loved Morecambe and Wise. And I think that did something to me in those days. And I thought, I was, even at an early age, I was obsessed with television, but I thought, being funny on television is a powerful thing. And maybe one day. So that's where it started.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, the first thing I'd like to say is that my heart skipped a beat when you said swap night with your parents.
And now, of course, I think, that's... Yes. My parents would be horrified if they were around to have any allegations made. No, it was entirely above board.
But I get it. But I'm intrigued because the young Graham Stuart was already sort of the antenna were up and went, oh my God, Morecambe and Wise, people can go on television and get this glorious reaction around the country. So it was as young as that they say, give me a child of 7 and I will give you the man. So it was as young as that you realised that this tool that Morecambe and Wise were using could be something that you could do.
I don't think people ever believe me, but I just had decided and that was part of it, from a very early age, that what I was going to do was to work in broadcasting. And I didn't come from, my father was a chartered accountant and ran a textile firm in Dundee. And there was no history of that kind of broadcasting dynasty that some people come from. He was a filmmaker. He was an amateur filmmaker, and he did make a comedy film, but it certainly wasn't that. It was I loved radio and television, and decided that's what I'm going to do. And the Morecambe and Wise thing suggested that area where I'd like to end up.
But was the young Graham Stuart involved in the theatre when he was young? Was there school plays or anything like that?
Yes, I mean, I think I did what people usually do. And yeah, I was always interested. I certainly was interested in theatre and plays, and I was involved in that. I think I was, and there were later experiences which confirmed it for me. And it's about, it's this thing about knowing yourself. What I knew was that I was never going to be a performer, although I did try it. But I sort of knew that my skill set was not really at home there. It was going to be in making stuff rather than doing it. But that didn't stop me trying, and I did try and do performance with varying degrees of success. As I got older, my obsession was with radio. I loved radio, so I would, try and do things, record things, and I loved the idea of, having a tape machine and using your voice and all of that. But in my heart and in my head, I thought, you know what, I'm not going to be a star. I didn't have that drive. I didn't think, you know what, I'm the funniest person in the room. None of that. I just thought, I know this world, but I know where I'll be in it.
You went on to become a sports reporter on screen on the biggest Scottish TV show, Scott Sport, with Arthur Montford. What did you learn from being on screen that helped you later on?
I was very young, completely naive, and I suddenly was involved in a television show which was very much a part of the fabric of Scottish society, because sport is an obsession there. And I was suddenly on it, which was very, very powerful experience for me as a young person. And I did it for 2 years. There are two things I can say about it. One, it was incredible education, and two, I was terrible, because because I wasn't trained for it. It was a world really without support. I didn't really have the help, and there are lots of reasons for that. Because suddenly I was moving. It was the lesson about being a performer. I was on screen. Everything, all the rules are different, but it was an amazing experience. I had some really big experiences while I was doing it. What it taught me so much about broadcasting and about live television and about how you deal with live television. And more than anything else, as someone who's has become a producer, it taught me the respect you must have for anyone that does go in front of the camera, that does go and open their mouth and say things that are being broadcast to a nation. I admire them. I admire all of them. I respect them. I've been there and I know what it was like. Also, the other thing of it, which is that then suddenly people know who you are. And if you're involved in sports television in Scotland, people have opinions and they like to voice them in, how can I put it, unexpurgated form. And that was an education for me as well. But no, I had amazing experiences, but I moved on from that.
It's great that you actually can actually understand from a psychological perspective what the person on screen is going through, and rather than being the producer who screams in their ear, just get it right, everything. You once told me over lunch, you once took over on Scott's Sport.
Yes, I did. Quite early in my career, Arthur Montfort, who was, I'd grown up watching and listening to Arthur. He was I think the polite expression is the doyen of Scottish sports commentators. His sports jackets and his vocabulary were legendary in Scotland. He was an extraordinary man. Anyway, he liked to play golf, and he went for a golfing weekend, leaving me to be the reporter and to present the entire episode of a show that I had, watched since I was a boy. And that was a formative experience. And I can tell you the quick story about that. I did the whole show, which went past in a blur. It was very, very difficult for me. I was naive and inexperienced. There's a lot to do. You're linking into the matches. You have to do interviews afterwards. You are playing in reports that I'd done before. You've got to do the latest news. And anyway, I get to the end of the show. And traditionally in broadcasting or in performance, you would expect that people on the floor would, when it's finished, they will say, well done. Yeah, well done. Good show. Nobody said that. Nobody said anything at the end of it. This is Scotland. People are not lavish in their praise. Anyway, I went upstairs to the office afterwards, and not really having spoken to anyone. And I went into the office, and the production secretary was there. And she said, "Oh, there's been a call for you." And I thought, well, the one person who would have a comment or say something after you've gone through this experience, well, that would be your mother. So I said, "Oh, was that my mum?" And she said, "No." So I thought, not even my mother is calling me. I said, "Who was it?" And she said, "It was Jock Stein, then the manager of Scotland, the one of the greatest football managers of all time, the man who took Celtic to the first British club to win the European Cup in 1967. A great, great man." And I said, "What did he say?" And the secretary he said, "Tell the young lad he did well." And that was the manager of Scotland saying that. And I've analysed that afterwards. That was really a big thing for me, but I've analysed that afterwards. And what was happening there was that Jock Stein was the greatest manager of men that football's ever known. He won the European Cup with these boys who were all from Glasgow. They're literally from a few miles at the centre of Glasgow. And he made them the greatest team in Europe, if not the world. And he did it with difficult characters. Jimmy Johnson, the genius but wayward, Jinky Johnson. He knew how to manage people. He watched me on screen. He saw the fear in my eyes, and he knew, like a player who was under pressure, that you either shout at them or you put your arm around them. He knew that I needed the arm around, and he gave me that. And I walked out of that building feeling 10 feet tall. Jock Stein said I'd done well. Didn't care what anyone else thought. Jock Stein, and that I've held that with me my whole life, and I think that's important too for the work that I do. Praise, the right praise at the right time, is such a powerful it's obviously a weapon, device to make people feel better.
I think that's such a great story, and it's so indicative of what the whole Humourology project is about, is that great leaders know when lightness, when praise is needed to pick people up. And that's, I mean, he was at least one of the greatest, if not the greatest of all time, and understanding. And you know, he essentially had a degree in people, didn't he?
Oh,
And
absolutely, yeah.
and I understand from my family, as you know, are from Glasgow, that he had also a wicked sense of humour. So he could tease, he could play as well.
But, you know, he was, and these terms are used lightly, but this is for real. He was a great man. If he walked into a room and I was in his presence and I saw it with incredibly, I was, you know, in the World Cup with Scotland and he was there. These people, these great players would immediately, it's not being submissive, they would just be respectful. They knew that this was a man who knew what to do, what to say, when to say it, how to do it. You know, he was legendary.
Oh, absolutely legendary. And I'm fascinated by, because you said a phrase during that Scottish people aren't lavish with their praise. And having spent a lot of my time as a child going up to Glasgow with my cousins, I'll tell you a quick story that the first time I was on Top of the Pops, I thought, you know, it was like you with wanting to work in television. My thing was to be on Top of the Pops. I thought I was going to be the new David Bowie, but I ended up having a penciled on moustache and singing stutter rap. But the first time I went off on tour to Glasgow, and I went to see my family, and they lived in Cranhill, which was very rough at the time. And I went there and all my cousins gathered round, and just, you know, you feel a bit sort of like I've been on Top of the Pops and everything. And they allowed me to puff my chest out a little bit. And they went, "Oh, we saw you on that there, Top of the Pops, Uncle Paul." And I was just enough. And then they looked me straight in the eye and went, "We thought you were Shay."
which is high praise in the East End of Glasgow.
It really is, actually. But to be honest, only people who understand that thing will understand that they did it with a glint in the eye, and they were having a laugh. And if you love someone in Glasgow, you take the piss. I think that's.
You do. They do take it to extremes. I mean, that was the thing when I was on TV. They as I said, people felt the right to make comments to you. You know, you're in their sitting room because you're on TV. And one time I was sitting in a bar in Glasgow, and you know, I got used to this. So there'd be the tap on the shoulder and look up, and you know, there was a how can I put it? Well, a distinctive Glaswegian type. And he said, I know who you are. But they always got my name wrong. The previous guy who did the job, his name was Andy Melvin. And there was a rumour that, because my surname was Stuart, that I was the son of Andy Stuart, the famous Scots singer. He does have a son who is similar age to me, but I'm not Andy Stewart's son. But so I was known as Andy. I got used to that. I said, you're Andy off the telly. And I said, yes, yeah. And he said, my wife really likes you. And I said, oh, thank you very much. And without batting an eyelid, he said, I think you're a C word. And, you know, he could say that because I was on TV, and well, yeah, thanks very much. And off he went. He had imparted the message he wished to impart, and I had to realise that I had become a C word for quite a lot of people. That was a lesson.
Yeah, well, it's a term of affection back in the day in Glasgow, to be honest.
It wasn't said with affection, but yeah, maybe.
You've done approaching, I don't know what is it, nearly 900 shows now with Graham Norton shows?
Yes.
And you've been up close and personal with more celebrities than just about anyone.
Yeah.
What is the difference that makes a difference, that gives someone true charisma and likability? And is humour essential in that mix?
It definitely is. Humor is absolutely vital ingredient. Put it this way, you cannot have full charisma if you don't have humor. You can have charisma, but it's a different kind of charisma. So the true star power is the ability to, show all kinds of emotions. And I would say that humor is high up there in terms of the skills required to be, a real star.
So what is that magic that happens? Because we had James Longman, who's the executive producer on The Late Late Show with James Corden in America, and he talked about Will Ferrell, for instance, having extraordinary charisma, obviously on screen, but in person there was something else that was happening. Is that about the humour that connects people, that ability to connect with everybody in the room?
Here's the thing about being really famous and being a true star, is you have to be exceptional. There are lots of people who are famous who are good, and there are people who are funny, and there are people who are great actors, and people who are good at sport or whatever. But when we're talking, and that's the privilege of working on the Norton Show, we're talking about people who are at the highest, in the top echelon, the highest tier of what it is they're doing. Those people are very, very good at what they do, and they're very good at being a star. The really good ones are the ones who are good at being a star. But, it can often be innate. Jock Stein, going back to Jock Stein, I'll give you two examples. Jock Stein and Tom Hanks, they seem very different, but both of them change the room when they come in. And that's a cliche, and people talk about that all the time. Believe me, because I've mixed with all these famous people, I know the ones that change the room. And Jock Stein and Tom Hanks, and if they came in together, the room would explode. They're brilliant at what they do. They're interesting and fascinating people, but they have an aura which is beyond what a normal human being. These are super normal people.
So really, humour, in your opinion, having seen all these huge stars close up, is a superpower at that level.
It is. It absolutely is. To use it correctly, to understand how you use it, when you use it, it is a superpower. When it's used at its full extent by a handful of people, it's amazing to be in that presence.
In psychological terms, I would say, because lots of people listening to this are going to want to take something away, and they go, well, that's fine, these people are born with it. But I actually don't believe that they are born with it. I think, and my thesis is, they are very good at listening. They are very good at cueing into what people need. And I think you can learn to get better at that. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah. Yes, Paul. I absolutely agree. We're talking, and I've used the expression already about skill set. I think being famous, being a performer, and being a funny person requires a set of skills, and you can, as with every skill, you can improve it. You can learn techniques, and you can learn ways of enhancing what you have. Even, the truth is, in fact, interesting, at the moment, Jimmy Carr has written his book about his life. And his theory is that you don't have to be funny, you just have to learn how to be funny. And I think that's true. But to be truly funny, there is a chip within you that has to be there, and then you can enhance it. But yes, you can absolutely improve and enhance your skills and be funnier and be more interesting. But the real talent are the people. The real talents are the people who, for much of what they do, it comes natural.
Yes. So, I mean, you love your sport, as do I. And is the analogy, which I think I was talking about on a previous episode, whereby David Beckham, let's just take an example, has for want of a better expression, a gift from God of coordination, sort of foot-eye coordination. And Gary Neville has an ability to work very, very hard. But I pointed out to my son when he was playing football that Gary Neville won more trophies than David Beckham. So you can make yourself better at it with work. And I think that's what people want to hear about, is that not that people are just born with this skill, but they've acquired it. And when I'm working with people, whether that's leaders or teams, I'm there to take what they've got and enhance it. And do you think you've enhanced what you do by being around these people and modeling them?
Your whole life. I mean, your whole life is about assimilating information and experiences. How you grow up, and you watch the best people. Well, first of all, when you're young, you just watch older people do that. Some of the things they teach you are wrong, but you do assimilate it. And I think that the ability to keep learning, and at whatever age, is very important. You know, I've been privileged to be around people who are at the very top of their game. And just one thing I would put in there, and it's connected to what we were talking about before, it's about also understanding your limits. Some people might not like this because they say, well, that's wrong. You shouldn't limit yourself. You should just do everything and be whatever you want to be. I think, you know, intelligence in life is understanding your limits. You want to try and exceed them, but you understand where you are. I mean, the example I would give, you asked me earlier about performing. When I was at university, I did a lot of acting because I really enjoyed it. And I was in a play at university, and I was doing a scene with a girl who went on to become a very successful actor. And we were doing a scene together, and I can remember this so vividly. We're doing a scene, and the two of us. And as I'm doing the scene, what I realized was that I was doing the lines, and she was living them. She was acting, and I thought, you know, I could spend 1,000 years doing this. I can never do that. And it was confirming what I thought. Look, I am not, you know, much as I like being on a stage, well, a bit, but, you know, if I ever fancied myself as being someone that was going to be a professional performer, it wasn't going to happen, or I was going to be mediocre. She was brilliant. I was functional. So my point is, this is not going against your point about teaching people. I think you can get better, but I'm just saying, when there's a bar, and I'm just being realistic, I hit the bar and then moved to one side.
Well, it's funny because I had a similar experience, obviously doing a lot of stage at the Comedy Store. I actually spent about 1.5 years guesting with the Comedy Store players when, in the really early days, when Mike Myers and Paul Merton and Neil Malarkey and Josie Lawrence and Sandy Toksvig and everything. And I held my own. But actually about 1.5 years in, I actually realized that this was, I could get to a certain level and I would have been decent, and I think I did well, but you suddenly realize that there is another level. Yeah, and it's later on that you can actually go, okay, well, it was Mike Myers and Paul Merton.
No, exactly. Everything's relative. You used a very, very, very good word there, and that word is decent. And if you think, well, what I'm doing is decent, that is damning with faint praise. Time to revisit your career structure.
Yeah, I agree. What makes you laugh, Graham?
You know, a lot of things make me laugh, and I absolutely love comedy in lots of different forms. I think, you know, I've got to be, when you do it for a living, you know, you've got to be careful. This is the thing that always makes me think, and it's a way that Americans, particularly American producers, deal with comedy. So they will listen to something, a brilliant piece of work, or you're pitching them an idea which is a funny idea, and they say these words, "Yeah, that's funny," and they say it with that expression, and you're thinking to yourself, well, maybe a laugh wouldn't be out of order at this point, but they're going, it's that thing about comedy as a science, and they're going, yeah, that works. And I'm aware of doing that sometimes. I could be watching a TV show and I think, yeah, that's funny. I think, well, I should be laughing. So you crave the comedy experiences when you do the natural reaction instantly, where you go, you don't have to say that's funny because your laughter says it is. That's what I look for. And it's, you watch a lot of it and you experience a lot of it. You get selective.
And so, I mean, you talked about Morecambe and Wise earlier on. Are they still the benchmark for you, or has it moved on?
Well, listen, they were amazing. Eric Morecambe, and Ernie Wise, again, it's fair to say now, it was a double act, and everything that Eric did was because of Ernie, and Ernie's timing was amazing. But Eric Morecambe was a fantastically funny man. Yes, I hold him in great esteem because that he made my dad laugh, and that's something that's always been important to me. The great thing is now you can see all this stuff. And I saw something the other day. I can't remember what I was flicking through, but there was a bit of Morecambe. Well, yeah, there was for some reason it was. I think BBC were doing something about Shirley Bassey, and I happened to be clicking through, and it was the Shirley Bassey and the Morecambe and Wise show, and it's a famous thing. And when you look at it now, the effects are. And the props are a bit cheap, and it looks a bit old-fashioned and clunky. Eric Morecambe is saying very little. But his body, he was a really good mover. He was a good dancer. The physical nature of his comedy and the face, I was laughing out loud. I just remembering how funny he was, and that was being watched by, at the time, wasn't 26 million people were watching it. That's how big that was. Yeah, I still like him, but there are a lot of other people that I love and are as funny or funnier. But yeah, he does have a special place. So Morecambe Wise have a special place.
I was lucky enough to be backstage at the David Frost show, Frost Live from London, with Eric Morecambe stuck in a green room. And that more than anybody else probably in the world, that green room thing when you're suddenly just there having a chat. And we were just having a chat about football, actually, a big Luton Town fan.
Yeah.
And what happened, and you will understand this, and you probably have your own stories about this, is that we were just chatting away about football, just the two of us, and suddenly a woman approached from nowhere and was very hesitant and was trying to come up and was sort of skulking up towards us and went, "Look, I'm so sorry to have disturbed you, but I was in the audience today and I just couldn't waste this opportunity to come up to you, Mr. Morecambe. I'm so sorry to have disturbed." And she was very humble and very lovely. But I just had to thank you for all the pleasure you've brought me and my family over the years. And she just had to say that. And he was so lovely and so humble and so embracing of that. And she backed off, apologizing, going, I'm so sorry, and everything. And just the two of us were standing there. And he just turned to me and went, "Seems like a nice young man." And he just did the gag for me. And
right.
You must have had so many of those experiences when you're actually seeing it at first hand and experiencing the magic.
We've been talking about it. It's this exceptionalism, this skill that goes beyond what people normally would think. I mean, look, I'm not going to trump your story, which is a good one, but some of the experiences I've had over the years. I remember, and it's sometimes, because of the talk shows, not just the Norton Show, because I worked on talk shows before, some of the experiences are kind of out of body experiences, in that when it's happened a couple of times in my life where I'm realized that what I'm doing, like you're in a one-to-one with people that are so famous, and they're looking at you and talking to you, and I'm sure you do the same, you come out of it. I mean, I always think of television terms. So I come out and I do a wide shot, and I'm looking down at myself thinking, I've got to better tape this, because no one's going to believe it. And the one that comes to mind is that quite a few years ago, because we had him several times, we had Robin Williams, who was one of the world's funniest people ever. And I went into makeup to just see the guests, and it was a makeup lady, Robin Williams, and me. And, I'm doing the producer, but I'm saying, Robin, we love having you on the show. It's so good. Thanks for being here. And yeah. And he wanted to chat. And we didn't. I'm going to ruin the story. I can't remember what it was we were talking about, but because I was going into a state of shock. What happened then, in comedy terms, was, and I admit that I'm not the right person to do it. The way he talks is that he started talking, and then and you know it from all the improv days, you've got to feed, you've got to do the feed, you've got to do, and which I realized and I was doing. And at that moment, I went into the wide shot above my head, because I was riffing with Robin Williams, the world's funniest man. And I was working with him. And, you know what? The terrible thing is I've forgotten what we were riffing about. I think it was something to do with being in London. But that moment, I thought, how many people get that chance? So that's me.
But actually, there's a really important lesson there, is that when you are doing that, it is about just listening to the person. That's the improv lesson, isn't it? You suddenly realized that you had to play, because otherwise he had nothing to play off.
Exactly.
I think that's really good. I was interested because you have prepped literally thousands of people for interviews. Now, a lot of these people are famous, so you think that they might know a bit about what they're doing, but some of them don't. You have to relax them. You will see, what advice would you give to anyone being interviewed on radio or TV?
It very much depends on what's expected of you. But if you're going on a talk show, an entertainment talk show, then, by the way, I was trained at LWT. We never call them chat shows, because chat is insubstantial. You only call them talk shows. So it's just a thing in my head. I can never call it a chat show. It's always a talk show. You're going to have to talk. That comes with the territory. And you're also going to have to entertain. And the way to do that is to be able to tell at least two stories. One of them will be cut out, but one of them will win. And it won't happen magically. People think, that thing where people, it's like inexperienced producers will say, well, just go on and be funny. No. Funny requires pre-thinking and planning. And it's not cynical, it's just being realistic. In your head, that's all you have to know. You say, and you tell the people who are going to interview you, whatever you do, ask me about beetroot, because I've got just a winning beetroot story. And then it's their challenge to work that into your interview. And that's all I would say. Just, do the funny.
So what is it that stops people from being funny? Because I think that nerves play a part, and talking yourself out of it can play a part. I always say there's two types of people in the world: those who get nervous and those who are liars.
It's so true.
When you're helping people to get over their nerves, do you have any things that you use to help people, or any tips that our audience might be able to use?
I think the kind of people that we're dealing with, I don't think nerves come into it particularly. No, certainly not. This is another thing. The reason the success of the Graham Norton Show, let's face it, is down to the remarkable and brilliant talent of Graham Norton. He is, without doubt, and people would say I'm biased, but I do know what I'm talking about, the most gifted, the most talented, and the most effective talk show host in the world, and the Americans agree it too, is that what Graham does is that and he's a comedian, he's got comedy time. To be a talk show host, I always talk about a Venn diagram of what, the skill set. And part of the skill set is being a stand-up comedian. Paul, you know this. If you've been a stand-up, you have a sense of timing and a comedy radar, which no one else gets. You can be a very funny, witty person, but if you have stood on a stage as you have, and you've looked at an audience and you have worked funny and been funny, that's very particular. Graham has that. He also has a warmth and an understanding and an empathy, because not only has he been a stand-up comedian, but he trained as an actor. We mainly have actors on, and actors sense the empathy from somebody who has done and experienced what they've done. So no matter who they are, when they sit down on the sofa or on the individual chairs, as we have now in COVID times, they look over to Graham and they feel that they're with somebody who will be kind and gentle and get the best from them. And nerves, if they exist, dissipate very, very quickly. And look, we've done thousands of guests, and from the highest to the lowest. If you took a poll of those thousands of guests and say, and as a television experience, how would you like that thing you always get in every website you're on? How would you rate it, 0 to 5? People are going to give them 5. Everybody's going to give them 5 because they feel that they had an experience of warmth, and that when you relax like that, even though there's a nervousness because of the circumstances, because you're on television and people are watching and all of that, I think at that moment you'll give of your best, and the funny people get funnier, the unfunny people get a bit funny, and the weirdos remain weird, but they might say something funny.
I think that's fascinating, and from a psychological perspective, what I think is so brilliant, and you've just expressed it about Graham Norton, is that he goes into that state ahead of the guests. So he is relaxed, he is cheeky, he is funny, he is empathetic. He's doing all the things that they need to do. And there's an automatic symbiotic process whereby they go, oh, I'm safe, but I can also go on that level. And I mean, you are sort of hiding your light slightly under a bushel, because you are doing this backstage as well. You are creating an environment. And I think, a lot of the Humourology project is all about, how do you create environments where this can flow easily? Can you talk a little bit about how you, running the company, create an environment where you get the most creativity and everything coming out? It's
very interesting. Yeah, and I know this is everything about Humourology and what you're doing. I've always felt that you should be in a creative business, but in any business, but we're in a creative business. So you want to create a world where people feel that they're not comfortable, but they feel safe, and that the currency of what we do, our business, is the idea. Some people think it's other things. Some people are spending their time thinking about logistics and money, and those are important. But for me, I've always said that our business, the currency, is the idea. Ideas can come from any person, any time, but they're more likely to come in an environment where they are encouraged. So encouragement Jock Stein in my head saying, the lad did well. Well, that I mean, God, I've been doing this so long, and I'm so old that, but I'm not thinking of myself as an elder statesman. I like to think of myself as an enthusiast. So when I work with development people, which is what we have to do with the right people, honestly, it's the best part of what we do. The best part is being in a space where you go, well, what if we did this? What if we tried that? What if we used this person? The energy that you derive from that absolutely creates the space for ideas. But in your business, whatever it is, if you're making TV shows or you're making widgets, can you create a place where people go, what? It's the what if. What if we tried that? That's the place which every company should have.
And isn't that where a lot of leaders, well, not a lot, I don't know the percentage, but leaders fail, is because they create an atmosphere which stifles creativity, and it comes from the top. If I asked you to write a business case, and I know you've written a lot of business cases in your time, but a business case for humour, what would you include in it?
Are you imagining a case to run a business or any business that you must have humour involved? Is that what you're looking for?
Yes.
It's vital for just human relations, and that is, after all, what you have at any company. People have got to connect to work together. They've got to connect because they sit next to each other. They've got to connect because you're passing messages. Everybody from the post room to the CEO office, everybody's connecting and communicating. So out of that, I'm saying, don't say to people, you've got to be funny. You've got to be funny. I want you to be funny. If you're doing something, be funny. I'd say, you know what? If you're doing something and there's something funny about it, say, happy with that. As I say, from the post room to the CEO's office, better get the timing right. If you wander into the CEO's office and say, a man walked into a bar, and I doubt if that's going to help you get on in life. But you know what I mean. If circumstances allow, and that the culture says, that can happen. You can be funny when it's right.
What's the return on investment? Because we have to consider that all the financial directors are going, why should we have more humour in here? There's nothing on the bottom line. What is a tangible thing that people can get from it?
And I understand, thinking about FDs and the demands they have. Well, I'll use the word productivity. Productivity, which sounds like a dull word, is actually it's a great word. It's a positive word. It's saying get the most from your people, therefore get the most from your business. Right? Get the most from your people, enhance your productivity. Everyone, your bottom line is improved. Everybody's happy. The FD is happy. The FD is cracking jokes. There you go. That's it. A positive workforce that's empowered and enjoying themselves. I guarantee your business will do better.
Great stuff. I couldn't agree more. We come to the part of the show, Graham, called Quickfire Questions.
Quickfire Questions.
Who's the funniest person in business that you've met?
The funniest person in business is undoubtedly Kevin Ligo, now running ITV, and I'm sure you know him well. Kevin is, and he's been very instrumental in our career. He was at Channel 4 when Graham and I started there. He's at ITV, and as you know, we're owned by ITV Studios, and Kevin is probably the most gifted television executive out there. But he has the driest and most effective sense of humour of anyone working in that area. So I would nominate Kevin.
A great choice. What book makes you laugh, Graham?
For just page on page wit and brilliance and just intelligence. Bill Bryson Lost Continent is a book that I return to, and it's so well done. I was a great American file, and actually we made films. I made films with Robert Coltrane, driving across America, doing exactly what Bill Bryson did. He does it so brilliantly. There are jokes in, we talk about laughter ratio. Sitcoms have laughter ratio, and comedy talk shows have a higher laughter ratio because people are quicker when people are doing the stuff that you do in a talk show. You can get more laughs. Bill Bryson gets more laughs on a page. And if it wasn't Bill Bryson, then my greatest hero is Clive James. So name any Clive James book and I absolutely love that. And I worked for Clive James, which was, again, a hugely important part of my career.
Oh, what a gifted man! Got sadly missed and everything. It's interesting that you said gags per page, and we used to talk about in comedy GPM, gags per minute.
Per minute,
you had to have the thing, and so you think about it in those terms. But Bill Bryson, oh, what a writer! What a genius!
It's brilliant.
What film makes you laugh?
Again, part of the privilege of my job was I got to meet the person involved. Mel Brooks is about the funniest person that there's ever been. And you can name any of them, but I'm going to say the producers because obviously it means something to me. So, if Springtime for Hitler, is that will do it for me.
We're going to take a shift to the other side, Graham. What is not funny?
I think it's like comedy is in the eye of the beholder, and uncomedy is also in the eye of the beholder. I mean, they're simple and trite answers. Okay, just to be technical, forced comedy is not funny. I mean, it's obvious, tragedy is not funny. All the bad things in the world, of which there are plenty. But if you force comedy, then the funny comes out of it. So the more forced it is, the unfunnier it is. So, yeah, forced comedy.
So describe forced comedy for me, because I automatically started to think of those comedies which had the canned laughter shoved on.
Yes, I mean that's true. That's forced comedy reaction. I'm talking about forced comedy. That is where someone says, "I have to be funny now, and this is what I'm going to say," or someone says, "You're going to be funny now, and this is what you're going to say." That will very possibly fall on stony ground. Comedy should be real, not necessarily spontaneous. It just should be real.
You've got an English degree. What word makes you laugh?
It's such a brilliant question, right? So the word that makes me laugh, the word that I use is a funny word, and it's a Scottish thing. It's a surname, and the surname is McGlumford. And it's not a real surname. There is a Scottish surname I think it's called McGlumfa. But McGlumford, now over the years, if I was ever telling a story that involved a bad Scottish person, or I was looking for a generic truth, I would always say that, that's what Mrs. McGlumford was saying. And I have used McGlumford. So, and you asked this is me, no one else is laughing now, but in my head, when I have a sentence which has got McGlumford in it, I think that's about the funniest thing I've ever heard. So that's a personal thing.
It's a funny name. It is.
It is. Well, thank you, Paul.
And guess what? Nobody else has ever chosen McGlumford. You'll be surprised to know.
Sure.
It's all yours.
Thank you.
What sound makes you laugh?
I like, I've never been a fan of the sounds that people use to make you laugh, because the world and for many people, anything that sounds like a fart is the funniest thing ever. And I'm not disputing that it can be funny, but that's not my kind of comedy. The sound that makes you laugh is the sound of a brilliant comic saying a word, and I'd rather hear it from a human voice.
It's the sound created by a comedian.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's funny because Deborah Meaden's choice of word was the word or the name Bob. but only said by Rowan Atkinson.
Oh, well, that's that's the most brilliant sequence. And Rowan, again, I've been very lucky to be around Rowan. He's at genius level, and he is as good as anyone has ever been, both in the physical comedy, but also in that verbal. To do what he did, we read out the names of pupils, but to do that Bob sequence, where he says Bob, I think he says it 7 or 8 times, and it just gets funnier and funnier. Who in the world could do that? That's genius.
And you imagine that written down on the page when the script comes in. And it's like there's nothing there apart from what he creates. So I completely understand what you mean by that. It's fabulous. Would you rather be considered clever or funny, Graham?
I would never. I'd rather be considered clever. I would never be considered funny. I'd never be considered funny because that's not what I do. I mean, I like funny, and I would try and say funny things in conversation, but I'm not. No, I'm not a funny person. I just love being in funny. So if people were, no one in the world is ever saying, "Oh, Graham Stewart, he's really funny." No one's ever said that. Maybe they did when I was on Scotsport, but there would be an epithet before that. No, I would like to be clever. Would do for me. Thank you.
Well, you see, you just proved yourself wrong because you made me laugh by saying there would be an epithet before that. So it's all real, Paul. This is I'm just dealing with reality. So that's real comedy, I suppose. It is. It's in the moment. And finally, Graham, desert island gags. You can only take one joke with you to a desert island. What is it?
Well, what I would take with me, and that one joke, is very short. I'm sure you are a fan of this comedian. It's somebody that has made me laugh through my whole life and always will make me laugh. And Stephen Wright, the master of the one-liner. And there's so many of them, of those one-liners, which are brilliant. But there's one that I've kept with me. And it's very simple, but it's in his laconic style. And I would be hearing on the desert island, I'd just be hearing his voice on a loop playing this. And it's very simple. And the joke is, I'm not going to do an impression, but I'll do it kind of in the style where he said, "I've been keeping a diary all of my life. Day 1 reads, still tired after the move." That's it. It works for me. You have to do it in his voice, but he is a genius, and that's the whole of life encompassed, and he does it in his style. I mean, right? Okay, if it wasn't that one, because I feel that one didn't go down so well. I went to a restaurant that said it served breakfast at any time, so I ordered French toast during the Renaissance. It's brilliant. A small world, and I'm on a roll now. It's a small world, but I wouldn't want to paint it. That's enough.
Brilliant.
He's a genius. He's another genius. I love him. And you know what? His dad was from Paisley. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
Stephen Wright, very American, laconic, and frizzy-haired. His dad was from Paisley. So there he's a jock. And that works for me as well.
Well, all the funniest people in the world are Celts. Discuss. We can say that. Graham Stewart, thank you so much for sharing your culture, your comedy, and lots of fun with us today on the Humourology podcast.
Well, thank you, Paul. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
The Humourology podcast was hosted by Paul Boross and produced by Simon Banks. Music by Steve Hayworth, creative direction by Les Hughes, and additional research by Helen Sykes. Please remember to subscribe, like, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. This has been a Big Sky production.